In its earliest stages, gastric adenocarcinoma operates beneath the threshold of physiological detection. Yet, while malignant cells divide and the mucosal layer begins to distort, the body's sensory systems remain silent. This period of transformation can last for months, leaving the patient unaware of the active pathology. When symptoms do eventually cross the clinical threshold, their character is determined by the physical relationship between the tumor and the gastric architecture. Two variables shape these presentations. The first is the primary anatomical site where the lesion originates. The second is the tumor's macroscopic growth architecture, the specific physical form the mass assumes. Analyzing the disease requires mapping this physical topography and identifying how different morphotypes interfere with function. Ultimately, the variations in clinical symptoms reflect the specific ways these different structures disrupt the stomach's movement, capacity, and integrity. We begin with the spatial distribution of the disease. This mapping of primary incidence zones shows a clear concentration in the pyloric and antral regions. Within these zones, the majority of adenocarcinomas arise along the lesser curvature. In contrast, tumors at the fundus and the gastroesophageal junction are far less frequent, accounting for roughly 10 to 15% of all cases. This distribution changes under specific clinical circumstances. If a patient has a history of pernicious anemia, the statistical likelihood shifts, making the fundal region a more probable site for malignant growth. These starting coordinates are critical, as they limit the surrounding tissues the tumor can infiltrate and the specific physiological processes it can disrupt. Focusing on the lesser curvature, we find the most frequent and aggressive architectural variant, ulcerative carcinoma. This specimen demonstrates infiltration typical of the ulcerative morphotype. The well-defined borders have a firm, raised, and rolled-out edge. At the center, rapid growth outpaces blood supply, creating a necrotic floor. The significance of this variant lies in its vertical infiltration. Following the right side of the specimen, we can trace the tumor's depth as it penetrates the muscularis propria and reaches the serosal surface. This rapid vertical movement through the gastric layers directly influences metastatic velocity. Once the serosa is breached, the disease quickly disseminates to regional lymph nodes and can directly invade the liver. While other types may expand into the gastric lumen, ulcerative carcinomas prioritize this deep tissue invasion, often leading to earlier systemic involvement. If we move to the body and greater curvature of the stomach, we see the second variant, the proliferative morphotype. These tumors form bulky, exophytic masses that project into the gastric lumen. As shown here, they often assume a cauliflower-like shape attached to the wall by a broad pedicle. While these tumors infiltrate local tissue more slowly and involve lymph nodes later than the ulcerative type, their exposed structure creates a primary clinical threat. Because the mass occupies the lumen, its fragile surface is prone to infection, secondary ulceration, and continuous hemorrhage. A third, distinct path is found back in the pyloric region, the slow, creeping fibrosis of serous carcinoma. This variant grows through diffuse infiltration of the submucosa and subserosa, rather than forming a mass. The specimen on the left shows the result: healthy tissue replaced by massive white fibrous thickening, clearly visible in this cross-section. The structural endpoint is Linitis plastica. As illustrated on the right, the stomach is transformed into a leathery, rigid tube. This creates severe mechanical failure. The stomach loses the ability to distend, the mucosa becomes highly rugose, and sphincteric control at the cardia and pylorus is destroyed. Proliferative tumors threaten the patient through luminal bleeding, while serous tumors destroy the stomach by eliminating its structural compliance. We can now translate these structural patterns into the recognizable clinical syndromes seen in practice. Group 1, new dyspepsia, is defined by a specific clinical threshold: persistent indigestion in any patient over 40 with no previous history of stomach trouble requires immediate investigation for malignancy. The bleeding surface of the proliferative morphotype typically leads to the symptoms seen in Group 2, insidious onset. This schematic shows the mechanism. Continuous, slow-dripped blood loss leads to systemic microcytic anemia, which is often the primary clinical feature before the patient notices localized gastric symptoms. Group 3 presents with continuous epigastric pain or discomfort. Unlike peptic ulcer disease, this pain lacks periodicity and is not relieved by food. When bleeding is more pronounced in these groups, patients may report coffee ground vomitus, a sign of oxidized blood. In Group 4, the presentation is defined by mechanical obstruction. As shown here, a mass at the pylorus occludes the gastric outlet. This leads to symptoms of fullness, belching, and vomiting as the stomach fails to empty. Group 5 involves the discovery of a palpable epigastric lump, typically resulting from large masses on the greater curvature. Illustrating the silent nature of early disease, in about 1/4 of cases, the discovery of this lump is the first and only presenting feature. Clinical symptoms represent the measurable outcomes of a tumor's primary macroscopic architecture. Because early symptoms are rare, lymphatic and vascular metastasis frequently occurs before any localized gastrointestinal warnings emerge. This leads to Group 6, where the patient presents with symptoms caused by metastasis rather than the primary tumor. Peritoneal seeding can lead to ascites, while lymph node involvement at the porta hepatis can cause jaundice. In women, distant spread forms Krukenberg tumors on the ovaries. Another systemic indicator is Trosseaus sign, the enlargement of Virchow's node in the left supraclavicular fossa. Vascular indicators may also be present, such as Trosseaus sign or phlebothrombosis of the superficial leg veins. Understanding these mucosal adenocarcinomas requires contrasting them against different tumor structures. This specimen shows a gastrointestinal stromal tumor, or GIST, which has a distinct macroscopic profile. Unlike adenocarcinomas that ulcerate the surface, the GIST is a solid mass arising deep to the mucosa. The intact mucosa lining is simply stretched over the tumor as it grows. Anticipating the clinical course of a gastric malignancy requires identifying its macroscopic identity. The disease's impact is determined by whether the tumor aggressively ulcerates, it insidiously bleeds, or rigidly fibrosis. The human stomach is a harsh environment. It constantly churns with strong acids to break down our daily food, which is why we often dismiss minor aches and indigestion as a normal part of life. However, clinicians look for a specific pattern called new dyspepsia. This is a vague but persistent indigestion that appears in a patient over 40 who has no prior history of stomach trouble. It is easy to assume these symptoms are just a flare-up of chronic gastritis or just a standard benign stomach ulcer. But the stomach's anatomy allows a large polypoid cancer to grow along the greater curvature, expanding into the gastric body without triggering immediate pain or obstruction. Because of this available space, early carcinoma is frequently clinically silent, showing no symptoms that are directly attributable to the growth itself. When pain does occur, it differs from a typical ulcer. It is continuous, it lacks periodicity, and is not relieved by food. Because the disease can mimic common indigestion, early detection depends on recognizing these subtle anomalies before the malignancy progresses. As the tumor grows, vague anorexia often transitions into an insidious, invisible loss of blood within the GI tract. This chronic bleeding leads to microcytic anemia, which may be the first clinical feature a doctor identifies in an otherwise asymptomatic patient. More severe warning signs include significant weight loss, dysphagia, and coffee ground vomitus, which indicates old blood sitting in the stomach. A physical examination then shifts to searching for evidence that the disease has spread beyond the stomach wall. Doctors feel for a firm, non-tender epigastric mass that moves separately from the liver. They also hunt for specific metastatic markers: an irregular hard liver, an infiltrated umbilicus known as a Sister Mary Joseph node, or Trosseaus sign in the left supraclavicular fossa. If these physical signs are present, the disease has already migrated, making immediate internal imaging the next priority. Objective testing begins with blood work, which often reveals a high erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and gastric function tests that show a total lack of stomach acid. To visualize the interior landscape, clinicians use a barium meal Xray. The contrast liquid coats the lining, revealing structural defects that are otherwise hidden. This radiological image shows the map. In panel A, we see a distinct polypoid mass indicated by the arrow. While benign defects are regular, panel D shows malignancy, a scalloped, irregular antral ulcer surrounded by thickened, clubbed folds. This physical alteration is due to tumor infiltration. In the left image, note the nodular appearance of the folds as they converge toward the intraluminal ulcer. Flexible endoscopy allows for a direct visual assessment of the mucosa, providing a higher sensitivity than conventional radiology. This technique enables doctors to see mucosal abnormalities directly and take immediate physical biopsies for pathological confirmation. Endoluminal ultrasound can be performed at the same time, identifying the 5 layers of the gastric wall to assess the exact depth of the tumor's invasion. These combined technologies provide the evidence needed to move from a clinical suspicion of an ulcer to a confirmed diagnosis of carcinoma. Once a biopsy confirms malignancy, the clinical objective shifts from finding the tumor to determining the extent of its spread. CT scanning and laparoscopic ultrasound become the standard next steps for preoperative staging. The CT scan is used to identify extragastric extension and detect lymph node involvement that might not be visible during a standard physical exam. Identifying liver metastases via laparoscopic ultrasound changes the surgical approach, preventing patients from undergoing invasive procedures that would no longer be curative. Gastric cancer remains a significant threat because it is so effective at posing as a minor stomach ailment during its most treatable stages. This is why any new, persistent indigestion or unrelieved stomach pain in a patient over 40 must be investigated with advanced imaging to catch the disease before it has the chance to spread.
If you found this video informative, please like and share, comment what you would like to see next, and subscribe to the channel to get notified about future informative videos.